welcome to episode 2 of The Guru. I'm Howard Falco, and today's episode is all about how to take conscious control of your ego. Yep, that nasty little thing called the ego, which can seem to get in everybody's way when they're on their way to greatness. It is amazing how the ego can jump in there right when things are going great, just to try and screw it all up. So today we're going to talk about the keys to consciously controlling your ego, what the ego is about, how to master it. It's amazing that in so many years of discussing the ego, which goes all the way back to the Latin word meaning I, that we still in society really don't have a really good grip on what it is. Or if we understand what it is, maybe we're just not exactly sure how to control it and how to master it. We've been taught for so many years that the ego is something to resist or fight, and I'm going to offer something today totally different to that, so that not something that you have to resist or not something that you have to pretend that you don't have, but just something to understand. And I think it's through the understanding of the ego that you achieve mastery over it. So let's first define what an ego is, and let's start with that understanding. So the dictionary definition of the ego is a thinking person, a thinking person, or self-importance. That's partially it. The psychoanalysis definition is the part of the mind that mediates between conscious and unconscious, and is responsible for reality testing and a sense of personal identity. That is much closer to the definition I'm going to offer today. We know egos from pop culture are people that have a general sense of, like the definition said, self-importance. They've always got to be front and center in a room. They always have to show you everything that they have materially or financially. And they just generally think that they're better than other people, and they have to keep demonstrating that. And there's a reason for that on what I would call a big ego person. It's mainly because their inner mind just feels the opposite. It feels that they're actually very small in the world, and they're not important. And they're fighting these thoughts of self-hatred in a lot of cases. And so the only counter to it that the ego has is to go out there and to try and mask those thoughts by getting validation from the world that something counter is true. But the problem is that doesn't really last very long. So this sort of moves into where I want to first start this discussion today on the podcast, which is what exactly is an ego and what is its purpose? I really truly believe that to master anything, it can't be just by motivation alone. You can't just say, hey, you got to resist your ego, destroy your ego, be egoless. Like, the mind's like, okay, that sounds great. Let me go out and do that. And you're like, okay, how do I do that? And how do you even know when your ego engages and it reacts to what's going on? So the only way I believe, and through the work that I've done, that this happens is through coming to an intellectual understanding of the purpose for the ego and how it's working for you, so that you can understand the cues that it's taking, where those cues are coming from, and take more conscious control of it. This path is all about self-awareness. It's becoming the witness to yourself, so you can direct your energy, your thoughts, and the way you think in the way that's most conducive to what you're trying to create in the world. Again, from a sports athletic perspective, from a business perspective, from a relationship perspective, from a health perspective, or just from a simple state of mind. So my definition of the ego is basically as the defender, protector, and creator of what you believe to be true about yourself. Now, the key word here is what you believe to be true about yourself. Because when it's not in harmony with what you know to be true about yourself, that's when the ego kicks into gear. And that is why it is such an incredible clue giver as to where what you think about yourself is not in harmony with what you truly believe at the deepest level about yourself. Because let's face it, when you know something is true, your ego doesn't have to do a damn thing to convince you of it. And that's the gem. Because when you're at peace, like if someone walked in the room right now and said, Howard, you're not a good father. Like, I wouldn't even flinch. Because I know in the deepest part of my core, through every action I've ever taken over the lifetime with my kids, that I'm a great father. So there's no need to respond. There's no need to react. My ego just kind of stays asleep like a dog on the couch that like lifts his eye up when someone says something and then closes it again. It's like, there's no need to respond to that. But when someone says something that you think about yourself, but you don't necessarily know is true, then the ego kicks into gear. So the example I use in my first book, I Am, is if you believe that you're a fashionable dresser and you always look good, and you put something on that you just think looks fantastic on you, and you go out and someone says, what is that you're wearing? That may cause the ego to kick into high gear if you don't have a secure feeling in who you are. And it might immediately start to respond, what are you talking about? What do you know? And this is expensive, and I bought this, and it looks great, and who do you think you are? I mean, it can go into overdrive over something like that. So what I want to do right now is I want to read the part in I Am, just 2 paragraphs that I thought was a really great explanation of what the ego is, that I'll read to you now. So we can start with this. So your beliefs about who you are, I am, form the script for your life, and consciously or unconsciously, they define what you believe you're capable of creating. Your ego, like a dedicated actor or actress, sticks perfectly to this script. Its job is to confirm your script and make it real by creating it in the world. Therefore, you could say your beliefs are like the seeds that contain what you intend to be each day. Your ego is the mechanism, which is an automatic process that occurs from within you that drives the actions you take that attempt to nurture these seeds into full experience and realization. In order to accomplish the task of verifying your beliefs, your ego will use any way of interpreting your world that it finds necessary. Whether or not you are in harmony with the truth of what's actually happening in the world or life is irrelevant to the ego. All that matters is whether or not your ego has accomplished the job of confirming your self-image through your experience of it. So basically the idea is you can think that you're a great athlete for a long period of time, but until your ego goes out there and competes and puts you in a circumstance where you can experience the greatness of what you've worked for, it's going to be just a theory in your mind. And the longer it goes on as a theory, the more itchy you're going to get for a real life experience of it. And it's the same way of being in love in our relationships. If we feel we're in a great relationship where we're in love and we get that feeling of being loved, the longer we go without it, the more it's just going to remain a theory, the more the ego is going to try and get that experience and get that feeling from our significant other. And of course, in business as well, you think you're a success in business. You've got to be working towards it and know that you're on your way to it, or get the experience every now and then that you've done a great job with your business, however that would, or however or which way that means to you. So that's the ego. Every single person in the world has one. So even the Dalai Lama has an ego. His ego tells him, hey, that's an organization that I would go speak at and give a speech at. That's an organization I'm going to say no to because it doesn't define who I am. So he's taking action just like everyone else to present himself in the world. Now, in more of a practical reality, when we talk about egos, even though everyone has one, we don't necessarily see it acting up as often as people with, quote, big egos who need that space, who need to present themselves in a way that for themselves that demonstrates who they are. And that's why people with big egos can be very exhausting to us, because they need us to play a role and to constantly stroke them or gratify them. Oh, you're right, you're the best thing ever, and yeah, you're the greatest. It can be very energy draining. It can be, it ends up turning into narcissism, which is an irrational degree of self-importance. And then that can be very draining to the room. You ever heard the term energy vampire? Well, that's what a lot of people with big egos that ends up turning into narcissism can be. So let's talk a little bit about what your ego's really operating out of and how to get to the core of it so that you can be a master of it. So the question is, what is the ego responding to? Well, it's responding to disharmony between who you think you are and what you're experiencing in the world. And anytime there's an opposition to that or a conflict in that, then the ego goes to work to try and make that real, to try and confirm to yourself that you are who you think you are. Until your truth, who you really believe that you are, knows it. Once you know it, you don't have to act up. Your ego doesn't have anything to do. Now, when you're creating something, your ego's in constant motion because it's constantly working to fulfill that creation. But when you're not creating anything and you're just thinking about yourself, that's when your personal truth can be really valuable. So the question then is, what is your truth? So your truth is, at the deepest core of who you are, what you truly believe about yourself. And so that is why the ego is so valuable, because when you see how somebody can get under your skin and cause you to become emotional, or cause you to get angry, or cause you to try and fix the situation, that is when you can sort of dig in and say, okay, how did this person trigger me? What did they say to me that made me question who I am? And how can I become more secure in who I am so that that doesn't happen again, so that the ego doesn't sidetrack me by running around trying to convince everyone or myself that I am that. Once I know I am that, I'm at peace. I'm in my power, because then I can really operate out of that. And this is one of the deeper nuggets of this work. What you truly believe about who you are is the only thing that life can really respond to as far as creation. Let me repeat that. What you truly believe at the deepest level about who you are is the only thing that life will continue to respond with, as far as people, places, circumstances, conditions, and results. Again, that is why self-awareness is such a critical path to self-mastery. So to continue on, so you have to discover what the truth is, and you have to be willing to look at that. You can look at so many different examples, especially when we're talking about egos that become destructive to what people are trying to create. So in sports, when an athlete has great success, maybe wins a championship on the PGA Tour, or becomes a really high-paid pitcher in baseball, or high-paid quarterback in football, and just has a great year, you're going to see very quickly whether or not the belief of that person is big enough and strong enough to embrace that kind of success and to continue with it. And I'm speaking more directly to the situations in where people have fallen from grace, or really just really destroyed themselves with certain thoughts or actions, or the way that they've performed on the field. You can see how they pull themselves back into a comfort zone when they've had success and it's not comfortable to who they are, or they don't believe that it's who they are. Then the ego goes to work trying to bring you back to the comfort zone. So in answering the question, why sometimes is the ego so destructive? Because it has to work out of the instructions that your subconscious, or what you really believe is true about yourself, is giving to your ego. And so becoming conscious of how your ego's acting is really a way to see the truth that you believe about yourself. And if you can't see the truth that you believe about yourself, you can't change it. So the way that I look to define the ego is, it's trying to validate what you believe to be true. So if it's working against you and you say to somebody, gosh, I don't know why I flew off the handle or got so mad, or I can't believe I kind of went to sleep on those throws as a quarterback, or I can't believe that I got mad and threw that pitch, or I hit that shot. A lot of times in golf, I'll ask a player, why did you hit that shot? There's like 4 or 5 different other ways you could have played that hole that are much simpler, much easier, and would have accomplished the job. Why did you hit that shot? And it's unbelievable how many times they answer to me, I don't even know. It just, things got going so fast. That's the club I normally grab, and I kind of convinced myself that I could do that. Now there's a secret right there. Convinced myself. The ego is a master manipulator of your conscious mind. It will try and tell you things in order to get you to do things to keep you in a limited perspective where you look back and you go, man, I really wish I didn't say that to that person. Or I really wished I would have asked that person for the order instead of letting my mind talk me out of asking them for the order. Or I really wish I would have asked that girl or that guy out when I had the moment and the chance to do so. Because your intuition's always going to tell you the truth, which we're going to get into in a minute. But your ego or your thinking mind is constantly working to serve the old belief about who you are. So anytime you're pushing towards something new, the ego is going to try and stay in your comfort zone and talk you out of it. So this is a huge key for expansion, for self-mastery, and for creative control, is to just take a break when you're in a process of making a big decision and think about the main question. Who do I choose to be now? I know who I've been. I know the choices my ego made in this situation 10 of the last 10 times. This feels so damn uncomfortable to make this decision. By the way, that's how you know it's the right decision. But I'm going to go with this, and I don't really know this decision. I don't know this action, and this is really uncomfortable to me. By the way, that's the edge and the precipice of change right there. But the minute that you do it, everything can change, because you're now directing your actions and your thoughts beyond what your ego was trying to protect and control. But you're now redirecting it to say, no, this is the new me. Even though we've done this together 10 times, we've acted like this. Nope, this time, I'm gonna hit a different shot here. This time, I'm gonna be vulnerable with this person, and I'm gonna tell them how I really feel about them. Win, lose, or draw in the relationship. This time, I'm gonna ask for the order with a sense of confidence and belief of what I'm offering them, that is going to make it almost impossible for them to deny it, because they're going to feel the truth of that belief. They're not going to feel the fear, they're not going to feel the worry, they're not going to feel the need or the anxiety. They're going to feel the belief that this is who I am. And a cool thing happens when you step into that version of yourself and you say, I am that. Your universe responds. Because remember, the only thing the universe can respond to is your truth. So let's go through, now that we understand what the ego's doing, why we have one, because it's bridging thought to reality. What we believe to be true, it's trying to make real. And the more there's a disconnect between what we believe or what we think about ourselves and what we're experiencing, and the more we're insecure about that or concerned about it, the more the ego is going to be in play, the more it works hard to get it done. But let's talk now about really the steps to how you master it. So the very first step is you look at an experience that you want to change, a behavior about yourself that your ego's jumped in the way and screwed it up before, and you say, I want to be different. I'll tell you a story. When I was first married, we were in our 20s, and you learn as you grow up from your parents, and if your parents fought a lot or had some fights, you maybe learn how things were exchanged. And in the early days of our marriage, some things, we would have, they weren't big fights, but there'd be things that were said, and my wife would be, why'd you say that to me? And I'd be like, I don't really know. And she said, that's not really nice. And I'm like, wow, this is 30 years ago. I'm like, I don't like that either. Like, I'm truly sorry. Like, here's what I want you to do. Anytime you hear me even remotely saying anything, just let me know. I'll be totally unguarded about it because I want to change that piece of me. I want to become a new version of myself. I want to get conscious of it. That's my intention. I want to demonstrate more love. And I said, can I do the same with you? And will you listen? She was like, absolutely. And it opened up this line of communication between us where we could easily tell each other, hey, that's kind of that old version of yourself. I'm like, wow, thank you for that. I apologize. Here's the new version. And it was easily overcome. And I got more and more conscious of it to the point where a couple months after that discussion, I didn't have to think about it anymore because the new behavior had taken over. The ego had submitted to the new intention that I had about who I wanted to be. So I encourage you, no matter what you're trying to create in your life, to set the intention for the new you. That's number one. That will drive your process of getting conscious of when your ego's getting into the situation and trying to take you back to the old self that you don't want to go to. You'll become much more aware of what's coming out of your mouth. You become the witness to yourself, and that is powerful because that leads to the change you want in all the energy and actions. And again, the universe will respond. Life will respond back to you. In dealing with thousands of people, I've seen it over and over and over, but I've also seen the fight the ego can put up right before it's about to change. You know how usually the worst part of the thunderstorm is right before it's over? Like, it has this like last little lash out and thunder and lightning, and you think it's never going to end right before it usually does. Reminds me of the story of the captain of the ship, and he's in the ocean and he's going through this incredibly wicked storm, and the crew's bailing out the ship and they're rowing and he's steering and everybody's looking at the captain for guidance, and he's like, we're going to make it, we're going to be fine. And the waves are crashing, thunder and lightning is hitting, and finally the captain, in a last ditch effort, goes up to the bow of the boat, raises his arms to the sky and says, give me everything you got. And right when he does that, the storm breaks. Because what he's saying is, hey, I'm going to captain this ship through this storm no matter what. Am I scared? Yeah. Am I nervous? Yeah. Is it going to override my intent to be safe and make it through this? Not a chance. I've got this. So give me all you got. And the storm breaks because the test is over. So a lot of times when we're getting ready to change something and it's uncomfortable, we may fight it at first and we may try and pull back. But the key is to keep going forward, to keep humbling yourself, to keep looking at the behavior that needs to be changed and adjusting it, and it will lead you to what you want. Now, the ego is really, really sneaky, and it will make subtle choices to work to destroy happiness before you even know it. It'll start to go to a negative state of mind. It'll start to do some things and cause you to take some actions where people will go, why'd you do that? Like, what are you doing? Because it's very, very subtle and it can sneak in before you know it. That's why being really conscious and doing a lot of self-check through the process until the new you shines through and your ego has been redirected in its energy and effort is really what the protocol is. So the ego weaponizes itself through a few key factors. It weaponizes itself by the use of fear, by the use of paranoia, by the use of regret or second guessing. That's one of its biggest tactics. Like, you make a decision and you feel good about it, and then 5 minutes later your ego's trying to get in your head, telling you, well, oh, you shouldn't have done that. Oh, they're probably not going to like it. Oh, that's not why they're not responding to your text in 3 split seconds after you sent it. There's got to be this element of faith in the process of your new actions where you just let it go and you don't need it or need the response or need the validation. You do it because it's who you want to be. So when the ego tries to use, especially regret, that's a real big one in business or in relationships or even in sports. Oh, I shouldn't have hit that, or I should be thinking a different way. Again, it's all trying to bring you back to the old behavior. So I want you to be aware of that when you're trying to get control of your ego. Your intuition is what's going to take you to new results in your life. So developing a strong intuition is really bypassing the thinking mind. And I know everybody listening has had a thought at some point in their life that came before you thought about it. All of a sudden you could be shaving, taking a shower, jogging, having coffee in the morning, and all of a sudden you get this great thought and you're inspired by it. You feel it in your heart and you get excited by it. And then 5 minutes later, your thinking mind talks you out of it and tells you every reason why you shouldn't do it, or it's too big of a task, or you'll never get it done. Those are key things to be writing down when you get the thought, because that's truth. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do it tomorrow, or you have to start a whole new project, or sell your home and cash in your life savings and go for it. You can if you want, but it's not a responsibility. But just know that those are thoughts about truth and creativity that are trying to get through your ego, which is designed to keep you in the comfort zone and trying to pull you back. So listen to those thoughts, write them down. Great actors and actresses, great athletes and great business people work off of intuition. They feel something is right, and without any empirical evidence or need for validation, they go with it because they've learned to trust that that's what will translate best. Developing your intuition is a real art. But the first step in doing that is to recognize what your ego's doing and when it's doing it. So to get a hold of that is a key part of this process of mastering the ego. And once you master the ego, you start to let intuition come through. You stop second guessing it. You get more into the flow of life. So the third thing, after you learn to develop your intuition and listen to your first thought and trust it, is patience and the ability to slow down at times. The ego relies on you not questioning it. So you get a feeling, you get a thought, you start to go into mode. The ego says, yeah, do this. And you have to have the ability to just self-reflect and say, does this line up with who I want to be? So in a personal relationship, that's an easy one, because let's say you're tired of drama and you're tired of fighting. And there you go, there's a trigger that someone says something to you and you start to feel your blood pressure start to pump up, and you got like 10 things you could just spout off and say that you're used to saying. And all I want you to do is just take a second, gather yourself and say, is this who I want to be? Because I know where my old habits and my thoughts and where my ego wants to take me right now. I'm not doing this. I'm going to be the new version. As much as I want to say these things, I'm not going to. I'm going to go this direction. And it can change your whole evening. In sports, it's the same thing. A lot of times athletes that have something happen that they don't like, the emotion will come in, and then they'll just think, the ego will try and convince them that more power and more speed and just bullying their way through it is the way that's going to get them out of it. And it ends up making things worse. So for an athlete to be able to take a breath, reset, redefine who they are and know that, and then step back into the batter's box, or get back into position in the field, or put the club back in the bag, think exactly how they want to hit the shot, know exactly what the right club is given the conditions, not the one they want to blast towards the green, win, lose, or draw, and stay patient and focused. Same thing in business. Something happens with a customer or a client, immediately you take it personally, take a breath, remember who you want to be, remember the type of people you want to cultivate as clients, reset who you know that you are, and then redirect your actions or your ego accordingly. So that's number 3, but that's a big one. And again, these actions are going to feel uncomfortable, and you've got to get used to the newness of it. You got to get used to the unknown. You got to get used to the nerves of the unknown because you're taking different actions. You got to get used to the success. This is a huge part of it too, because what are these new actions that your ego is doing? What is it really leading you to? It's leading you to more of the conditions that are going to produce what you want. So you have to be ready to receive this kind of joy and this kind of fulfillment. And all the people that I've worked with for 15 years or so, this is my stat. I believe it was printed somewhere. I'll have to find the source for the article, but only about 4 to 4.5 to 5% of the world's population thinks from a positive perspective. About 94 to 95 to 96% think from a negatively dominated mindset. Now, if you think about that, it's easy to see why so few achieve greatness, or so few achieve true, well, depending on how you define success, but achieve the things and the happiness that they want. I believe that as where we're at right now in human consciousness, that we're really at a crescendo of a buildup of negative energy, which is going to lead us to more of an understanding of consciousness and mind, the stuff that's coming to you right now, that is going to change the psychosis and the human psyche, where it understands the benefit of a more positive, loving, compassionate, and happy and joyful mindset. And I think we're coming out of a lot of years of darkness. I'm not saying they're all darkness. There's a lot of great joys and successes in life, but a world of war and famine and poverty and climate change and a lot of things that have caused a lot of suffering. But I really believe what will lead us out is a shift in consciousness, a shift in the way that we think about ourselves, and more of an openness to receive and experience joy and happiness in our life will cause the collective to create it on a larger scale. Instead of it just being those 4 or 5% or 8%, I hope it's growing every year. And I think by more of this type of work coming out, it's sort of the evidence that it is. But part of achieving success and moving yourself into that space of that percent that achieve and experience this is the ability to receive it, to know that you're worthy of it. So again, to keep working on that idea of who you are, to be more open to that kind of success. That's the way athletes achieve it and stay in it and achieve that high level. And when they don't, and when they start to not see some good things in themselves, that's when they fall from grace. And it's really the same thing with any other sport or any other area of life. In movies, the allegory of the metaphor of what the ego can do and how it can take over and be so destructive, two main ones have come to mind as I was putting my notes together for this podcast. One of them was obviously Star Wars, where dark side, stay with the Force, stay with the light. Luke against Darth Vader. Darth Vader represented everything: envy, hate, anger. And Obi-Wan was always trying to tell Luke to stay away from the dark side, and how the power of the Force is what will really help you conquer that. And then the other one is The Ring. Lord of the Rings, sorry, not The Ring. Not the horror movie, The Ring. That's not what I'm talking about. The Lord of the Rings, where he had to destroy this ring that sort of centered on all this negative power, and how when you put the ring on, if you couldn't control it, it would take over your whole being and create this awful dark side that just wanted power and control and was very me and I-based. And so it's another great series. If you haven't seen the movie, one of the greatest movie making that's ever been done in the trilogy of the Lord of the Rings. But the idea is, and the analogy and the metaphor is this idea of ego and what it tries to serve and how destructive it can be. So the whole idea behind gaining self-mastery over your ego is One, to understand fully what it's doing, that it's always working for you in some way, no matter what it's trying to do, whether it's trying to destroy or create, it's still working for you, ironically. To be able to dig into what your truth is, to be able to dig into where the insecurities have been, and how to come to more of a sense of peace within yourself about who you are, to how to appreciate yourself more and know you're worthy of what you're trying to create, which will give you the intention, the awareness, the focus, and the patience to overcome an old ego and to send new instructions to it of how you want it to behave and act in order to bring you everything that you deserve in life. So keep redefining you and keep reminding yourself of the new you. You are your ego's master. It is not the master over you. All right, beautiful people, thanks for being here today, and I look forward to talking to you again very, very soon. So long.